Hello. Uh, Thank you so much for joining me at this early session. I see some of you didn't party too hard last night. I'm really excited to be here in Austria. I've been really enjoying my time here so far. I'm from San Francisco, so I came a long way. And thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about design systems. I'm curious, does anyone here work on a design system or with one? Okay, a few of you, that's cool. Anyone not familiar with what a design system is? That's totally okay. I'll share some resources at the end so you can get started. But design systems in a general context have been around for ages. If you've seen the NASA Graphics Standards Manual, which was back from the 70s, that is a design system, and they documented their system across vehicles, spacecrafts, even like their uniforms, and everything was thought through as a system. However, these days in the digital context of like product design and web design, software design, design systems have come to mean a different thing. For some folks, it's a Sketch UI kit. This was the Sketch UI kit that we had for the Salesforce Lightning design system. This was from the spring 2017 release. And some folks would argue that this is not a design system, but I argue that it is, because if you think about the words design and system are really general words, they're vague words, and if we take it at its simplest meaning, a design system is just a design thought through systemically across something and not just like thought in a single spot, like a page, for example. So this is a system of UI elements. By the way, is there water by any chance? I'm getting a little dry, yeah. So for some companies, especially larger companies, design systems are used as a component library or pattern library or UI library or style guide or whatever you want to call these things. Basically, it's documentation which typically shows code and their usage and guidelines. So these days, a design system has come to mean an entire ecosystem. Thank you so much. So for some companies, you might have like a UI kit from Sketch. You may also have other design assets, design principles, and a full visual design language. And that can be like a part of a larger group of brand. And brand also includes content strategy and voice and tone. And these can be in the style guide, which may also include components, development, standards, a UI presentation layer, documentation, and so on. So for those of us that work on design systems like these, I do ask why. Why are we here? Why design systems? And why do we do what we do? Why are we into this stuff? And why is this important to us? Do you love exploring tools? Cool. Are you a total nerd for automation and efficiency? A lot more hands this time. That's cool. Do you love patterns and turning chaos into order? Awesome. This is a phrase I hear a lot and I've seen on a lot of resumes. Do you like bridging the gap between designers and developers? Cool. Or do you do it because design systems are so hot right now? And that's totally fine. It's a really fun time to be in design systems right now. And it's interesting to take a step back and ask ourselves these questions, and it can help you determine what our mission is. So in today's context of design systems, especially in the digital software and web space, we often talk about design tools. We talk about automation, design, components, pattern libraries, but it's important to remember our purpose. We usually want design systems to improve our product design and development, and that's how we determine the success of a design system, right? By how we improve the quality of the product, how much faster we ship that product, how much code we reduce in our product. But in the end, who are using these products? Well, our users, our customers, our people, and that is why we do this. Our purpose is for people. And so we have our external customers, but we also have our internal customers. These are the individual contributors, the managers, senior leadership, executives. If you're in a consulting engagement or an agency, then you have your clients. And when we sell design systems in our organizations, we usually focus on success and productivity. But a design system alone is not going to achieve any of those things. It's important to remember that it's the people instead that make this happen. So design systems are not just about inventories, documentation, code frameworks, sketch UI kits. Design systems empower change in your culture. I studied graphic design at Memphis College of Art, and it's a beautiful school, but it wasn't just a school of art and design. We had to take liberal arts courses as well, and a topic that I really enjoyed was anthropology, or the science of human beings. My professor was Deborah Halstead, who was an archaeologist and an anthropologist, and she had a really interesting background. She would go on archaeological digs, and when she was younger, a Yoruba woman actually adopted her into her tribe. So this is a photo of her in a spiritual supply store that she runs and owns, and she sells herbs, candles, incense, ethnographic art, religious icons, and it caters to Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, Wiccans, Voodooists, et cetera, et cetera. And the name of her store is Ebo, Ebo Spiritual Supply. And Ebo is a Yoruban word that means to give to that which is higher than yourself. And I always liked the sound of that, to give to something greater. And I learned a lot from her, as well as, from my travels. And it helped me kind of reshape the way that I thought about the world, and my worldview changed. And I'm very grateful for that. But why am I talking about this? Well, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about, and lately my writings and presentations have been very people-focused, I realized that this was something I kind of really wanted to share with you. I'm not an anthropologist, but I love the people part of a design system effort. I love working with people and helping make their lives better. So I realized that that's actually why I chose this career, and I really enjoy having a positive change in the organization that I work in. In the summer of last year, I left my job at Salesforce, where I was the lead designer on the Salesforce Lightning design system. And we had a ton of process in place to make our work efficient. We had these incredible design principles, which I'll go over a little bit later, and they still influence my work today. And we also created a lot of internal tools and resources that helped us actually work on the design system itself. And over time, the organization began to lean heavily on us for support and guidance. And we evolved and expanded these tools to help them too, especially with the weight of expectations of a large company like Salesforce. So we experienced a lot of change. We were a living, evolving team with a living, evolving process to reflect a living, evolving product, which of course reflected a living, evolving customer base. People change, people learn, people grow. And that's normal. So in most cultures, especially, if you're thinking like in a sociology context, they have assets that are part of a society. So you can usually break these down into two types of assets. You have your tangible and your non-tangible. And the tangible are material elements. This could be your tools, your writings, artifacts. And the non-tangible are non-material elements like values, beliefs, language, and so on. And cultural norms are about behaving by the standards and expectations of that culture. These norms break down into laws and customs, and we know that laws bear more importance than customs, but both shape the way in which we behave with each other. And one culture's norms can be wildly different from another's. And then you have your rituals, which are the established methods and ceremonies, and these usually mark a point in transition. In our world, it might be kickoff meetings, retrospectives, sprint reviews. So going back to how design systems empower change in our culture, when you do design systems work, you do impact the culture. You change how people work, how they communicate, and how they share that work. So when you are a part of a culture or society, you will identify closely with others in the same environment when you have the following things. You feel like you belong to a culture when you have a sense of membership. You belong to something bigger. Another way is to know that you have impact, like you have influence in your organization. You're more likely to give back. People want to be heard. When you have, or when you feel like your needs are being addressed or integrated into a process, you feel valued. And finally, you feel an emotional connection with others. As you know, this isn't about you, it's not about me, it's shared across the organization, everyone you work with. Empathy is really important here. So when you have these things in place, you feel like people feel like they belong, they have impact, they're heard, they have an emotional connection, then those people are aligned by the same standards. So in our design systems work, our materials and artifacts are things like our style guides, or documentation, or component libraries, or sketch UI kits. And the non-material is our shared language and nomenclature, our tenets, our principles. So it's really easy to get sidetracked with tools, services, methods. Different types of open source tools are constantly being argued. I see it on Twitter all the time. But it's important to keep our customer in mind. And to do this, an essential tool are your design principles. And while I listed principles as a non-material asset, they can be material as well because they are a tool. Alla Komatova recently wrote in her book, which is called Design Systems, that design principles must be relatable and memorable. And she suggests that you should always use them, you should always refer to them, you should always include them in your presentations, reference them in your design critiques or your code reviews. You should even display them. And she also suggests that you shouldn't have too many of them because it's all about being able to remember them. So at Salesforce, we had 4 design principles that guided our organization, as well as the projects we worked on, even the CSS framework that we were working on. The first principle was clarity, and it's a total coincidence that my conference is also called Clarity. I actually named it and bought the domain name before we landed on these principles, but it's cool to kind of see how that alignment was sort of already a thing, and it kind of influenced how I named my event. But anyway, so clarity is about eliminating ambiguity. You want to enable people to see, understand, and act with confidence. And efficiency is their second principle. I say is because it's still their principle, but I don't work there anymore, so was. But the idea around efficiency is streamlining and automating, optimizing workflows. You want to intelligently anticipate needs to help people work better, smarter, and faster. Consistency is about creating familiarity, strengthening intuition by applying the same solution to the same problem. And then the fourth principle is beauty. Demonstrate respect for people's time and attention through thoughtful and elegant craftsmanship. So we had these beautifully illustrated posters displayed all over the place at our office at Salesforce. And our design systems intern at the time, Miles Thompson, created these illustrations, and they're all based on monuments in San Francisco. And we gave these out at events like Dreamforce. We talked about them constantly. And most importantly, we actually used them to drive our design decisions. And in case you're wondering, we did hire that intern, and he's now a really awesome product designer at Salesforce now. Craig Villamore, who is my friend and mentor, talks a lot about this in his own work. And when we launched the Salesforce Lightning Experience, which launched at the same time as our design system, he wrote an article which was in Forbes magazine, and he said, sorry, it's like, there it goes. The more decisions you put off and the longer you delay them, the more expensive they become. And this really kind of struck a chord with me, because it's important to get to design decisions, or really any decision, as quickly as possible. And you can use your design principles as an actionable tool. So in our case, at Salesforce, we were really big on stack ranking anything. So anytime we had a list of anything, we would put them in a priority order. And so we use this with our design principles as a way of coming to a decision. So if we were debating if something was not consistent, but it actually provided better clarity or efficiency, then that would win because that was the priority order that was important for our organization. And so having your principles stack ranked enables you to make decisions with confidence. And as exciting as design systems are right now, it's unfortunate that some of them do fail. And in my experience, I found that failed design systems are due to a lack of shared vision, no shared language, and no purpose. So if you focus on these areas and the people that you're serving, then your design system will be better set up for success. Values can shape a culture's norms. These are important to an organization. It can be considering like what's good or bad, what you want, what you don't want, and it drives the decisions that you make. It influences the expectations of the work ethic in your organization. So I have to update my bio because I actually did take a full-time job. I'm not consulting anymore. I work at Amazon now. And when I joined Amazon, I learned about the leadership principles that they follow. Customer session, ownership, invent and simplify, you write a lot, you learn and be curious, hire and develop the best, insist on the highest standards, think big, bias for action, frugality, earn trust, dive deep, have backbone, disagree and commit, and deliver results. And they all have a description that goes with them. I'm not gonna read all those to you right now, but if you are curious about them, they are online, so you can find them at this URL. But I want to zero in on the principle that was in the #1 spot, which was customer obsession. So according to Amazon, leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. And although leaders do pay attention to competitors, they obsess over their customers. Recently, I watched a biographical drama called The Founder. Has anyone watched this movie? Just a couple of you. I highly recommend it. I really liked this movie a lot. And it dawned on me as I watched it that there's some parallels to this story and the work that we do in design systems. And so if you'll allow me to explain. So in this movie, Michael Keaton, I love Michael Keaton, he plays a character named Ray, and he's a traveling salesman, and he's selling a 5-spindle milkshake machine. And he tries to convince people that if you increase the supply, demand will follow. But a lot of people actually don't want to take the time or the money to get these new machines. They say they're doing fine on their own. This might sound familiar if you've ever tried to convince your boss why you need a design system, that it'll help ship products faster, but instead, sometimes those people might want you to just stay focused on feature work. I've certainly been there. So anyway, a restaurant orders a really large amount of these milkshake machines. And so Ray travels across the country to check out who these people are. And he meets the original founders of McDonald's. Their names are Dick and Mac. And they share their origin story, which I thought was really cool. They call it their innovative speedy system. So they removed whatever overhead they didn't need. They only offered hamburgers, French fries, and soft drinks, because that was the bulk of what people wanted. So they didn't use car hops, because people could go get their food at the window. They didn't use dishes, because they felt instead people could just use disposable paper packaging. And they cut out cigarette machines and jukeboxes and things like that, because it wasn't necessary to the experience. But most importantly, what they cut was the wait. So if you've seen the movie, you'll recognize the tennis court scene, which is the best scene in the whole movie, in my opinion. They called it the Crazy Burger Ballet, and they literally shut down their business to do this. They drew a floor plan of the restaurant, and they kept choreographing movements and placement of things to try to find like the perfect choreography and the perfect layout for their restaurant. And the scene is really awesome. They end up landing on their most synchronized and automated layout. And all the machines were in their strategic locations. The design, the layout was perfected. But most importantly, it was the people that made this all work. Recently, an article came out by Airbnb called The Way We Build, How Rethinking the Airbnb app Changed the Way We Approach Design. And Alex writes about their ambition to rethink how the people at Airbnb worked. And they've been doing some really impressive work around automation. In his article, he says, here's the simple truth. You can't innovate on products without first innovating the way you build them. And this is pretty similar to what they were doing in the founders of McDonald's. They didn't innovate on the hamburger. They innovated on speeding up the experience to receive a quality, consistent hamburger. They did speed up the process. They even custom built their kitchen. They created a custom utensil that allowed them to have a precise amount of ketchup and mustard. But I emphasize that all of this had a purpose, which was to speed up the customer experience. It had a purpose, a fresh, delicious burger from grill to counter in 30 seconds. So it was made for the customer, it was made for people. Has anyone seen the New York City Transit Authority Graphic Standards Manual? Does anyone own this in their collection? So in 2014, Jesse Reed and Hamish Smith reproduced the manual, and they did it through a very successful Kickstarter campaign. And they reproduce now like more of these. They did the NASA one, and they've done a few more since. I'm a big fan of mid-century and minimalist design, so I really enjoy looking through the pages and the letter forms, the shapes. It all appeals to me, and as a design systems person, I find these really inspiring. But it does have a purpose, and it's actually in the book itself. It says, the purpose is to orient people within the subway environment. The passenger will be given information or direction only at the point of decision, never before, never after. This program will eliminate visual clutter and information that is misleading or unnecessarily repetitious. So the typefaces, the colors, the shapes, they all had a purpose. And I really liked the bit about showing information only at the point of decision. I thought that was really strong. So this is about guiding people quickly where they need to go during the hustle and bustle of their busy, fast-paced day. And the standards were designed for the transit customers. But let's take it back to your internal customers. So as I mentioned, I'm now at Amazon, and usually when I'm working on a design system, it's for a product that's already existed. Maybe there's a redesign coming up. But in this case, I'm working on a design system for a brand new product that isn't out yet. Unfortunately, that means I can't tell you about it yet, but it's interesting because the design systems and operations work that I'm doing right now has a huge impact on the product's potential growth. So if you think about the products that you love, most likely the ones that you really love have really great customer support, or maybe really great educational resources, or perhaps that product is so great because you can use it how you want to use it. It works with your workflow or lifestyle, your process. It's accessible to you, it's approachable. You might even feel like you're a part of it. If you look at the Apple fan base from like the last decade, you know, the community all kind of felt like an ownership of it in some way. So how do we apply this towards design systems? As you're working on them, consider the people that you're working with. Do they feel like they're part of a community? Because that is what you're doing when you work on or create a design system. You're creating a community. If you're, you know, does your organization feel empowered to join in on the fun? You know, people need to see it, they need to learn it, understand it, adopt it, consume it, share it, evangelize it, support it, iterate it, evolve it. Everyone in your organization is an owner of a design system and everyone should be able to contribute and use it. So at the first Clarity 2 years ago, Claudina Sarai gave a presentation called Deconstructing Web Systems, or a Pattern Language for Web Development. And in her presentation, she discussed open borders, which are about working with people across disciplines. They're about breaking down silos and barriers. It's important to have everyone able to contribute regardless of their expertise. And I couldn't agree more. Similarly, one of my favorite quotes is by Diana Mounter, who leads design systems at GitHub. And she wrote an article called How to Empower Designers to Code. And she said, true collaboration isn't throwing designs over a wall. It's designers, engineers, and the rest of the team sharing the responsibility to build a quality product. Reduce the barriers, support and empower them, and designers who code will become the norm. I really like this approach because it's a people-driven approach, serving people. So, if you're working on a design system, it's important to listen. What kind of value are you providing in your organization? Who are you serving? If you hear people's input and apply it to practice, and find out how you can fulfill their needs, this is a much stronger way of growing your design system rather than just advertising, hey, you should use this. You want to build relationships and solve problems together. And when you respond well to feedback, you gain trust. So it's really normal to want to affect change in an organization on a wide-scale level. But to do that, you have to affect each person in the organization. And if you're trying to do that all at once, that can be daunting. So I suggest to choose a designer or a developer, or two, and work with them individually, and find out how you can make their life better. What are their struggles, their hopes, and how can you work together to make it all better? And once you have a deep, well-working relationship with that person, they in turn can spread the knowledge and on to the next person. And you'll find that you'll have many more frequent, smaller success stories than waiting for that one big success story. And that in itself acts as a great marketing tool for your design system. And you also want to help others go further. I've been mentoring a designer on design systems and best practices, particularly for visual design since he's not a coder. So we'll focus on things like spacing, typography, color, accessibility, best practices. And one day I noticed he was doing a red line spec for a design. And this kind of, made me sad. And if you're not familiar with what a red line spec is, it's when you mark up a design with all the spacing, the sizing, the colors. And this kind of, made me a little sad because the whole point of working on a design system and creating a component library was so that these red line specifications weren't needed anymore. However, he did say something to me that kind of took me back, which was that he needed to go through that process so that he understood the craft and the reason why we were abstracting things the way that we were. So I was reminded that it's important to retain a beginner's mindset. And by honing his craft, he can understand the why, so he could grow into a stronger design systems designer. So I found that it's very, awesome to have working and pairing sessions, not just between developers, but also between designers and developers as well. And to work on not just the product, but also the design systems for that product together. And you want to have people contribute and have an impact. And sometimes you might learn something new. And when you do, share what you know and learn it together. If you're doing, in our case at Salesforce, we had a design systems advisory board. And we had a representative from various teams that would attend so that we could all learn collectively. And giving and sharing is a good thing. If you don't take the effort to provide guidance, to empower and help your organization, then the design systems work that you're doing will risk lack of adoption, or it might even become a bottleneck. Or worse, it might get abandoned. I was watching a TED Talk by Adam Grant, who is an organizational psychologist. And in his talk, he goes over 3 types of people in the workplace. The first person is a taker. And he says takers are self-serving in their interactions. It's all about, what can you do for me? And the second type of person is a giver. And givers approach most interactions by asking, what can I do for you? And finally, the third person, who he says is what most people are matchers. And it's a balance of give and take. You know, I'll help you out, you help me out. So in his research, he found that givers are on the extreme, on both extremes of the spectrum of success. So, you know, some people might perceive a giver as a poor performer because they spend so much time helping other people that they're not spending time on their own work. However, he found that givers actually made the whole organization better. And his studies provided evidence that helping, sharing knowledge, mentoring led to higher profits, customer satisfaction, employee retention, and lower operating expenses. And so the conclusion of his study was that givers are the most valuable people, and you have to protect them from burnout by decreasing the amount of takers. And I highly recommend watching the video if you, I don't think I put the URL, but if you just search for Adam Grant on the TED website, it's a really good talk, and I highly encourage to watch it. So giving more and taking less is really important. You know, remember the EBO thing I mentioned earlier, giving that to which is greater than yourself. It's all about that organizational impact. So change is very normal. If you stay long enough in an organization, sometimes you see norms, rituals, values change. You might even see language change. Things might evolve or go away altogether. And if you move from one organization to another, like let's say you're changing jobs, you're now introduced to a new culture, and you may see some similarities, but you'll also see a lot of different things. And so the team I'm working with now at Amazon is so different from the team I was working with at Salesforce. At Salesforce, the design system's source of truth was our CSS framework. It was, you know, code. However, at Amazon, it's not code, it's InVision and Sketch. So, you know, my old self would be cringing, but I'm actually learning to understand this new culture's way of working. And while I am working on a design system in CSS, I'm meeting them in the middle by making them comfortable and making Sketch and InVision part of that process. So the reason I want to mention empathy is I see a lot of arguments on Twitter about, you know, whether design systems should be in code, whether they shouldn't be, whether designers should code, and so on. I just think it's important to meet people where they're comfortable and encourage everybody to be able to collaborate no matter what their skill sets are. And that's kind of the overall message. And I do want to mention about the design systems community. I really love this community. We share knowledge, we give talks, presentations, we write Medium articles, and so in a way we're all helping each other be better design systems developers and designers, and that's pretty rad if you think about it, because that means we're all helping each other serve our customers. Even though we're all at different companies with different agendas. So I think that's pretty cool. And if you've watched The Founder, you'll probably know it's not just a success story, it's also a little bit of a sad story, because people can be really crappy to each other when they don't align on vision, they don't align on goals. And so what I try to do right now, especially with current events in America, has me a little sad. I try to, think how I can help people in my own personal circle of influence. So I encourage to be open source if you can, be inclusive, share your toys if you can, and we'll all be a much better community for it. And it's, of course, to remember that design systems are for people. So if you're interested in getting involved in the community, contribute to styleguides.io. It's got tons of articles, resources. It's open source on GitHub, so you can contribute as well. I do have a Slack. If you go to slack.design.systems, you can converse with I think it's over 6,000 people now of developers and designers focused on this work. There's a publication I just started on Medium, publication.design.systems. There's also Stu Robson runs Design Systems News, news.design.systems. Are you noticing a pattern here? And I just created a design systems jobs board too, if you're interested. There's only like one listing up right now. I have a meetup in San Francisco that was mentioned, Coalition Design Systems, and it's starting to open chapters in other cities as well. And finally, Clarity, which will be in New York this year, is the Design Systems Conference that I organize. And there are 2 others that are in Europe that I recommend. There's Patterns Day by Jeremy Keith, and there's also one in Helsinki that is called Design Systems Conf, and that one was really good. So, quick shout out to Webflow for being a Full Moon patron on Patreon. They've been supporting my work, and I just wanted to give them a little shout out. And so thank you so much.
Thanks, Jina.